The supermarket was bustling with customers, shelves stocked, high with fresh produce, snacks, and daily essentials. It seemed like just another ordinary evening. Until it wasn't. A sharp voice cut through the low murmur of shoppers. "Stop right there!" Heads turned, eyes widened. Near the entrance, a young man stood frozen, his face pale. He couldn't have been older than 20, dressed in a worn hoodie and faded jeans. A security guard had grabbed his wrist, gripping it tightly. The boy struggled, but the grip was firm. "You think you can just walk out without paying?" The guard snapped, holding up a small item, a chocolate bar, slightly crumpled from the struggle. "Stealing, huh? Let's see what the police have to say about this." Whispers spread among the onlookers. Some shook their heads in disapproval, others exchanged glances, unsure what to think. It wasn't every day you saw someone getting caught red-handed. Minutes later, the wail of a police siren echoed outside. A tall officer stepped into the store, his uniform crisp, badge glinting. Under the bright supermarket lights, Officer Daniels had been on the force for over a decade. He'd seen his fair share of troublemakers, from petty thieves to dangerous criminals. But something about this case felt different. He approached the boy, who was now sitting on a bench near the store's entrance, his hands nervously fidgeting in his lap. His eyes darted around, filled with something beyond fear, something deeper. The store manager, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun and sharp features, huffed in frustration. "Caught him sneaking out with this," she said, waving the chocolate bar. "And who knows what else he's hiding?" Daniel studied the boy. He didn't look like the usual troublemakers he had dealt with before. His face was thin, almost too thin, and his hoodie looked oversized, like it had been passed down from someone bigger. His hands were trembling. "What's your name, kid?" Daniels asked. The boy hesitated, glancing at the floor. "Jake," he muttered. "Jake. What?" "Just Jake." Daniels sighed. "All right, just Jake. Do you have anything else on you? Any weapons? Anything you shouldn't have?" Jake shook his head quickly. "I swear I didn't mean to." The officer cut him off. "We'll talk about that in a minute. Stand up." Slowly Jake rose to his feet. His shoulders were hunched, his body tense. Daniels noticed the way he kept glancing toward the exit, like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. "Turn around, hands where I can see them," Daniels instructed. Jake obeyed. As Daniels started patting him down, checking his pockets, something felt off. The boy's heartbeat was racing. Daniels could feel the slight tremor in his body. Then, his hand brushed against something inside the hoodie's inner pocket. Something small, smooth. A folded piece of paper. Daniels pulled it out and unfolded it. His brows furrowed as he read the shaky, handwritten words. The moment he saw what was written, his stomach clenched. This wasn't just a case of shoplifting. It was something much, much bigger. And suddenly, arresting Jake was the least of his concerns. That should set up an intriguing start for your story. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks. Daniel's grip on the note tightened. His eyes flicked back to Jake, who stood motionless, his breathing shallow. The boy had been nervous before, but now, seeing the officer read the note, he looked absolutely terrified. Daniels took a slow breath, forcing himself to keep his face unreadable. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He needed to get Jake out of here, away from the prying eyes of the store manager and the curious stares of customers who had gathered near the entrance. "All right, let's go," he said, his tone neutral. The store manager folded her arms. "That's it? You're just taking him?" Daniels shot her a look. "I'll handle it from here." She huffed, but said nothing else. The security guard loosened his grip on Jake, who hesitated before following Daniels outside. The cool night air hit them as they stepped into the dimly lit parking lot. Jake's shoulders were still hunched, as if he expected something bad to happen at any second. Daniels led him to the patrol car, opening the back door. "Get in," he said, but his voice wasn't harsh. It was steady, almost calm. Jake hesitated again, his eyes darting to the streets like he was calculating a way to run. Daniels noticed. He had dealt with enough scared kids before to know the difference between someone guilty and someone desperate. "You're not in trouble," Daniels said suddenly. Jake blinked, caught off guard. "What?" Daniels sighed. "Just get in the car. We need to talk." Something in his tone must have convinced Jake, because after a second, he slid inside. Daniels shut the door and walked around to the driver's side, climbing in. He adjusted the rearview mirror, watching Jake in the back seat. The kid wasn't fidgeting anymore. He was just staring at the floor, his fingers gripping the edge of his hoodie sleeves. Daniels reached into his pocket and pulled out the note. He unfolded it again, reading the words under the faint glow of the dashboard lights. "Please help. My little sister is alone. I don't know what to do." The handwriting was messy, hurried, like it had been scrawled in a panic. Daniels glanced back at Jake, who was staring at him now, his eyes wide, full of something close to pleading. "Your sister," Daniels said slowly. "Where is she?" Jake swallowed hard. "At home," he whispered. "Is she in danger?" Jake hesitated, then gave a small nod. I don't know for how long." Daniels didn't like that answer, not one bit. He started. "The car, pulling out of the parking lot. Tell me everything." Jake took a shaky breath. "It's just me and her," he said. "Our mom left a while ago. My dad, he's not around anymore." Daniels kept his eyes on the road, but listened carefully. "How old is your sister?" 6, Jake said. "Her name's Lily." Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened slightly. "A 6-year-old. Alone." Jake continued, his voice quieter now. "I tried to get a job, but nobody hires kids. We ran out of food yesterday. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I took something small, it wouldn't matter." His hands clenched into fists. "I wasn't trying to steal. Daniels cut in, his voice firm but not unkind. "I get it." Jake looked up, surprised. "You're not the first kid I've met who's been backed into a corner," Daniels said. "And I know what hunger does to people." Jake didn't respond, but something in his face shifted, like he wasn't expecting an officer to understand. Daniels turned onto a quieter road. "Where's your apartment?" Jake gave him an address. It wasn't in a good part of town. Daniels knew the area well. He had been there before for calls, domestic disturbances, evictions, kids left home alone. It wasn't the kind of place a 6-year-old should be staying by herself. As they pulled up in front of the building, Jake was already reaching for the door handle. "Wait," Daniels said. "Let me go in first." Jake shook his head. "She'll be scared. If a cop walks in," Daniels hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but if something's wrong, you tell me. No hiding, understand?" Jake didn't answer, but he didn't have to. The look in his eyes said it all. They climbed the worn-out stairs, the building smelling of damp carpet and something stale. Jake led the way, stopping in front of a door with peeling paint. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a key with shaky fingers. As soon as he unlocked it, the door creaked open. The apartment was small, barely any furniture, just a mattress on the floor and a few scattered clothes. The air was cold. Daniel spotted a tiny figure, curled up under a thin blanket. "Lily," Jake whispered. The little girl stirred, blinking, up at her brother. When she saw him, Her face lit up with relief. She sat up, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "You're back," she mumbled. Daniel stepped inside, his presence filling the tiny space. Lily noticed him then, her small body tensing. "It's okay," Jake said quickly. He's here to help." Lily clutched her brother's sleeve, looking up at him for confirmation. She was tiny, too tiny for her age. Daniels could see the signs now. Malnourishment. The apartment had no food, no heat. The kids had been surviving on their own, and not well. Daniels exhaled slowly. He had come here expecting to arrest a thief. Instead, he had walked into something much worse. He crouched down, meeting Lily's eyes. "Hey, kiddo," he said gently. "Are you hungry?" Lily hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Daniel stood up, pulling out his phone. This wasn't just about shoplifting anymore. This was about survival. And he wasn't about to walk away from these kids without making sure they were safe. Jake watched him warily. "What are you doing?" Daniels met his gaze. "Getting you both some help." Jake stiffened. "No, please. If they take Lily away..." "I'm not here to take anyone away," Daniels interrupted. "But you can't do this alone, Jake. You shouldn't have, too." For the first time, Jake looked like he wanted to believe him, but fear was still there, buried deep. Daniels knew this wasn't going to be easy. The system wasn't perfect, but he also knew one thing for sure. Tonight, these kids weren't going to be alone. Jake's breathing was unsteady. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He didn't trust the system. He had seen too many kids get separated, sent to places worse than what they'd left behind. He wouldn't let that happen to Lily. "You don't understand," Jake said, shaking his head. "If they take her, she'll be scared. She needs me." Daniels kept his voice calm. "I do understand. More than you think." Jake looked at him, searching for any sign of a lie. He wanted to believe the officer, but he couldn't afford to be wrong. Daniels could see the fight in the boy's eyes, the desperation of someone who had spent too long carrying a weight too heavy for him. He wasn't going to push. He just needed Jake to see that this wasn't the end. It was a way forward. "Nobody is taking her away," Daniel said carefully. "But she needs food. She needs a warm bed. And so do you." Jake swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to Lily, who was still holding onto his sleeve. She was watching the two of them, sensing the tension. She didn't say anything, but Daniels could see the trust she had in her brother. It was unshakable. Daniels took a step back and pulled out his phone. "I know a place," he said. "It's not a shelter, not a foster home. It's for families who need help. Together, they'll make sure you have what you need." Jake hesitated. "They won't separate us." Daniel shook his head. "Not if I have anything to do with it." Jake didn't answer right away. He looked around the apartment. The bare walls, the cold floor, the empty kitchen cabinets. He had been trying so hard to be enough for Lily, but the truth was, he was just a kid himself. He was tired. Finally, after what felt like forever, he gave the smallest nod. "Okay." Daniels let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good," he said. "First, let's get you two something to eat." Jake gave a small hesitant smile. "Real food?" Daniels grinned. "Yeah, real food. Not stolen." A few minutes later, they were in the patrol car, driving through the quiet streets. Jake sat in the front seat this time, while Lily was curled up in the back, half asleep. Daniels had called ahead, making arrangements at the center he mentioned. They were expecting the kids. "You're really doing this?" Jake asked after a while. "Helping us, I mean." Daniels glanced at him. "That's my job." Jake scoffed. "Cops don't usually care." Daniels nodded slowly. "Some don't, but some do." Jake thought about that for a moment, then looked out the window. I used to think asking for help made you weak, he admitted. It doesn't, Daniel said. It means you're smart enough to know when you need it. Jake didn't respond, but his shoulders relaxed just a little. When they pulled up in front of the center, the lights were still on, warm and welcoming. A woman with a kind face stood by the entrance waiting. Daniels turned to Jake. You ready, Jake? Took a deep breath. He looked back at Lily, then at the building. It wasn't much, but it was something. He nodded. Yeah. As they stepped out of the car, Lily reached for Jake's hand, holding it tightly. He squeezed it back, giving her a small, reassuring smile. Daniels watched as they walked toward the entrance together. He had started the night thinking he was dealing with a simple shoplifter. Instead, he had found two kids just trying to survive. Before Jake disappeared inside, he glanced back at Daniels. For the first time, his eyes weren't just filled with fear. They held something else. Hope. Daniels gave him a small nod. Tonight, things had changed. Maybe not everything. Maybe not all at once. But for Jake and Lily, it was a new start, and that was enough.